historic borough of Holborn celebrates Canada Day as Canadian troops parade to dedicate a memorial. Detachments of the RCOC and the RCEME, who make their headquarters in the borough, pass through the main street on their way to the bomb-scarred Holborn City Hall. An ensign and a bronze plaque are presented to the citizens who have played host to Canadian units for 30 months. Wilfred Mullen, Mayor of Holborn, and his councillors preside at a colourful ceremony. The Army Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Montague, and the Right Honourable Vincent Massey represent the Dominion. The presentation commemorates the admiration of the Canadian Army for the courage and constancy of the citizens of Holborn. It expresses gratitude for the unfailing kindness and hospitality of the borough. In accepting the ensign, the Mayor tells Canadians, "Your tenure among us has added luster to Holborn's long and distinguished history." Thus is further cemented the comradeship of peoples in the mother country and their Canadian friends. In critical times, they have stood together for one common purpose: victory. The Honourable John Bracken, leader of Canada's Progressive Conservative Party, visits a military hospital in England. The objects of his visit are to see Canadian men and women in the active army overseas, to understand the extent and character of the operations in which they are involved, to try to plan wisely for the future of these men and women when they return to Canada. He greets many veterans from his home province of Manitoba. At 1st Canadian Army Headquarters on the Western Front, Mr. Bracken is welcomed by General Crerar. In the ops room, the GOC explains how buzz bombs are dealt with here. John Bracken states, "I'll tell folks back home that the Army knows its job and is doing it well." Canadian genius for improvisation goes to work on those pneumonia specials, the Jeeps. In Italy, several super-duper winter models are on display. The only limit to the class of the crate is the amount of material which may be scrounged. If you can lay hands on enough talc from some officer's map board, you can equip her with side windows. They're always useful while watching for MPs. Then there's the sport model, made by crossing a station wagon with old Betsy. Care must be taken not to cross the quartermaster at the same time, or it will be a frosty Friday. The Black Maria design is very popular. Maybe it brings back sad memories, but it does have advantages. Something new has been added. That something should be filled with water, but use your own judgment. If you are a general officer, you are entitled to the custom-built town car. First, you borrow a used car from friendly Italian natives. Be sure you leave them friendly. Then you graft it onto the chassis with Dawn-8 cable from Signals and chewing gum from the Yanks. The results are amazing. Even heaters are available if you speak nicely to certain people. With all the modern conveniences in Italy, they are able to drive in issue underwear until the thermometer hits 40 below. At least, so they claim. Yes, the winterized Jeep is sure here to stay. There's no job too big to be handled by that Army garage behind the lines, the RCEME workshop. In Holland, the mechanized Army is kept rolling by means of repairs and replacements. Those things which can't readily be fixed are replaced from the great stock of supplies continually arriving from Canada. All vehicles are given routine checks. Motorcycles need plenty of care, and charging batteries is a big job in itself. Precision work is turned out by lathe hands. An ammunition carrying rack is welded on the back of a carrier. In one corner of the workshop, a smithy operates. Every detail of every vehicle is attended to by experts. When action is taking place, they work at high pressure 24 hours a day to keep the Army moving. Whether it's jerry shells, floods, or muddy roads that make the vehicle a casualty, the RCEME service station is on the job to send it back to its unit fighting fit to carry Canadians to battle. For the first time in several years, a typical Canadian snowstorm in miniature hit southern England. In the central area of London, nearly 2 inches of fluffy, damp snow covers everything. In the suburbs, as much as 4 inches make transportation difficult, while delighting Canadians on leave. The harsh outlines of familiar landmarks are softened by winter's magic touch. In St. James Park, it's hard to realize that up in Glasgow there's not a trace of snow, and down in Devon it's bright and sunny. The only hardship is caused to people in houses damaged by V-bombs. It's like old times back home to visiting servicemen and their friends. Snow shoveling squads are not necessary in London. Just wait a couple of days and inevitably it will rain. Thus, the whole problem is settled. Hardy Canadian bush pilots navigating their own planes pioneered the great Canadian Northwest staging route. The story of its development is now just released. Flying over a treacherous wilderness, they brought vital supplies to lonely outposts. In the 1920s, they gathered the hard way the details which make possible the great 1944 air highway to Russia. Putting their data to use, the Canadian government built a chain of airports from Edmonton to Alaska. After the United States entered the war, Canada offered the Americans free use of the airway to Alaska. Extension and enlarging of airfields is carried on by the United States and Canada to accommodate the large volume of traffic. A typical example of good neighbors at work together. At the central airport of the route, Edmonton, Alberta, supplies are loaded. They are consigned to key stations along the airway. A continuous shuttle service is in operation to ferry maintenance equipment and supplies. The first port of call is Fort St. John, an old trading post of the 90s. Flying over the British Columbia boundary into Yukon territories, the transport heads into the post at Watson Lake. At Watson Lake, refueling is done by the United States Army Air Corps. Everything from bed springs to meat is unloaded as the precious octane fills the tanks for the next stage of the trip. Close to the Alaska Highway, the air route is removed from the Pacific coast. It is comparatively free from enemy attack. At Whitehorse, Yukon Territories, the American ambassador to Canada, the Honourable Ray Atherton, inspects the station and its staff. Relics of yesterday's transportation systems contrast strangely with the modern way of travel. Dog teams are still used in rescue parties. The last stop on the journey before Siberia is Ladd Field, Fairbanks, Alaska. In the hangars of the United States Army Air Corps, dozens of American fighter planes are ready for their hop to Russia. Over 5,000 American-built planes have been flown to Russia over the Northwest staging route. U.S. pilots ferry planes from American bases to Fairbanks, and there the Russians take them away. So, through the friendly cooperation of two good neighbors, with a third across the Aleutians, another deadly arrow is on its way, aimed at the very heart of a doomed Germany.